Okay. So welcome to everybody to this third ACC lecture. And we see that we are a lot of people today, and we are very happy about that. And we please we remember to everybody to switch the camera and the microphone off.
Beni görüyorsun. Bir de duyuyor musun?
Remember to switch your camera and microphone off, please. And we are very happy to introduce you the studio Traumnovelle, and we have here Johnny Leia. And what I want to do now is just to give you a few information about Traumnovelle, and then we let Johnny explain us the focus of today's lecture, that is about uselessness. So Traumnovelle is a studio, or better a militant faction, as they love to define themselves, founded by three Belgian architects, Léon Drapeau, Manuel Léon Fanjoul, and Johnny Leia. And they have a multidisciplinary approach with architecture at the crossroad. They use architecture and fiction as analytical, critical, and subversive tool to emphasize the contemporary issues. And today, as I was mentioning, Johnny will talk about uselessness. So, Johnny, I let you. It's your time.
Okay, thanks.
And thanks to be here.
My pleasure. So, good afternoon. Before I begin, I would like to, of course, thank the Politecnico di Torino, the ACC team, so Rossella, Martina, Silvia, Ilaria, Aurora, and Tommaso. And of course, all of you that are connected, 127 people, for being here on this sunny afternoon. Of course, these days, there aren't many other places where we could have been. So yeah, here we are. Architects are rediscovering the importance of the interior. I also have to confess that we can never say no to any invitation, especially coming from Italy, because we first love to discover your wonderful cities. Bad luck, not in this case, not for today. The other reason why we never say no is because it was, I think, probably the first advice ever given to us as a new studio. Nancy Goldring from the fantastic office site told us after our first lecture in Roma that we should always seize every opportunity to talk about what we know. And we must have missed something because our lectures always talk about what we don't know. More specifically, that which raises questions. Asking the right question is always more important than answering a bad question. So feel free at the end of this lecture to give us the answers if you think you have them, but please allow me to caution, Aldo Rossi cannot be the answer to everything. We are usually presented as a young office, but there is nothing more dangerous than to be categorized as young. So each of us inside our little rooms or kitchens, bathrooms now are all already old. So old enough to take our own responsibilities and become the citizens that we want to be. Like now, tutti a casa. At the same time, being considered young by other people conveys a complete freedom. You can say whatever truth you want to say, and people who self-categorize as old will hear nothing more than a little baby crying. And this could also be said about Belgium, which is a too small country in Europe to be considered to be of any political weight. And we at Traumnovelle are both young and Belgian. So as Silvia said, we like to consider ourselves or to call ourselves a militant faction of architecture. As she said too, at Traumnovelle, we use architecture and fiction as analytical, critical, and subversive tools to emphasize contemporary issues and dissect their resolutions. Traumnovelle, or should I say, doppio sogno, alternates between a cynicism, a bit, and enthusiasm, a lot, all the while advocating for critical thinking in architecture. Traumnovelle distances itself from current forms of naive architecture and refuses to glorify the mundane. Traumnovelle sides with those who have not sacrificed ambition and criticism. It was founded in 2015 by Léon Drapeau, Manuel Léon Fanjoul, and myself, John Lea. And Traumnovelle was created while we were still students at Lacan in Brussels. We then realized that if we wanted a space of freedom where we could address what we consider the most important issues, we had to create that space for ourselves. Our first big project was Eurotopie for the Belgian Pavilion at the Venice Architecture Biennale in 2018. Which was supposed to be reenacted in March, like now in Nuremberg, but it will be for later, hopefully. Our little faction is divided in two parts that, strongly interlace. So far, besides exhibitions, scenographies, and publications, our build practice is focused on spaces of production. We finished our first project, a 2,000 square meters office space in Charleroi, and we are currently working on extensions, again with the same clients. By a wonderful divine coincidence, we have also started to work on the transformation of a castle into what the client calls an utopia. At the foundation of the office, we decided to address one specific but very large topic: architecture and politics. Berlage said that to build is to serve, so the questions we often raise are, what do we build and who does it serve? For us, everything is fiction, which means that all the elements which make up human societies have been constructed and as such can and should be questioned. Nothing is more frightening than the pretense of an absolute truth. And fictions can be deconstructed and rebuilt. That is why first we need to be aware of how they permeate of our perceptions of the world. So now in what some people call this post-truth era, we could also call fictions ultra-realism. This afternoon, this sunny afternoon, we would like to seize the crisis situation to discuss with you how, as architects, we can contribute to the world. So in this planetary lockdown, let's discuss uselessness. Could uselessness be the key to finally being useful? Investigating uselessness is, of course, a way of being useful, at least for us, but maybe in an unexpected way. In a lecture given by Natalini in 1971 at the AA in London, he said, if design is merely an inducement to consume, then we must reject design. If architecture is merely the codifying of the bourgeois models of ownership and society, then we must reject architecture. If architecture and town planning are merely the formalization of present unjust social divisions, then we must reject town planning and its cities, until all design activities are aimed towards meeting primary needs. Until then, design must disappear. We can live without architecture. So yes, the questions on all of our lips are how to be useful to society. How can architecture be useful? What is architecture? For the last question, one of our students in Amsterdam answered that, yeah, of course, architecture is sculpture, but with plumbing. This is, of course, true, but architecture can also be more than that, hopefully. For Hans Allein, he would even say that everything is architecture. This is certainly one of the reasons why history is so important in architecture. Because not like in mathematics, in architecture, a new formula don't erase the previous ones. Both remain possibly valid. So again, how to be useful to society and how to be a useful architect. Knowing that architecture is a luxury Italian product for the amusement of rich people, is it relevant for it to try to address society? Philip Johnson famously states that architects are luxurious whores. Okay, so we are still at the beginning of our discussion. So for now, we still have a bit of hope, right? The main issue that we have right now is this urge to be useful, to be efficient, to be productive, so useful to your employer rather than to the general good, useful to the market rather to the ecosystems, useful to the state rather than to the society. Usefulness is determined by how much you consume or how much you produce. Easy. As the Italian philosopher Nuccio Ordini said, the cult of usefulness drives the spirit, destroys creativity, and our dignitas hominis. Excuse me for my Latin. Universities and schools are a threat in so much as they act as devices to prepare useful architects or academics. But I may have to remind you that at this point, even if you wanted to behave as a nice, cute, useful architect ready to embrace the market, I mean, Italy, like Belgium, have the most architects per inhabitant. This means that your chances of someone allowing you to be useful are low. So yes, your alternatives are to travel, to find a place to work where you can work as a cat monkey. Or the other option is to think and then act. We are now facing the biggest threat humankind has ever known, the destruction of our ecosystems, which will probably lead to a change of era. Construction is responsible for 40% of our global CO2 emissions. Our planet has been entirely redesigned, leaving no space untouched. But yeah, in the same time, let's not be more guilty than we we have to, because I mean, no one needs architects. Only 5% of the new constructions are planned by architects. Architects' new fantasy in usefulness is economy of means, so that we can be useful for less money than before, right? Amongst ourselves, the debate revolves around topic branching from the interest of the market. So we have circular economy, sustainability, participatory processes, labeling. None of us are talking about truth, beauty, space, labor, politics. This is not fully true, of course. Some contemporary architects are talking about space or beauty, but maybe they are still maybe too useful, right? Jan de Wilder, on the question of the role of the architecture of architects, quotes the Belgian artist Francis Alice. Sometimes doing something poetic can become political, and sometimes doing something political can become poetic. And could we propose instead, sometimes doing something useful can become useless, and sometimes doing something useless can become useful. So maybe architecture should be useless. Useless to the market, useless to the destruction of our planet, and maybe architecture could be something other than just a commodity. We will now continue with a definition, then discuss about 4 ways to become useless. Through retreat, negation, asceticism, and operaism. We will not give you the perfect recipe to be a useful architect for society. Because again, today, let's pretend that we need to be useless. As the artist Posenske said, it is painful for me to face the fact that art cannot contribute to the solution of urgent social problems. Uselessness is the fact of being of no use or of not working or achieving what is needed. This definition already raises 100 more questions. No use to whom, to what? How do we define what is needed and should we aim to achieve it? Retreat. After the fall of the Iron Curtain, Russian architects rediscovered their own culture through foreign publications and learned what had been going on abroad. They discovered, of course, Aldo Rossi and the revolutionary architects from the 70s. At the same time, they were faced with a severe stylistic regulations, dire economic conditions, and powerful bureaucracy. Bored by their positions as draftsmen in corporate offices, an eclectic collective of self-named paper architects used their free time to work on foreign competitions, especially in Japan. They won a great number of these competitions, something that Michael Bilov explained by the fact that they were the only ones really working on them, on that, as if their life depended on this useless thing. Thus, they achieved early international and national recognition. From the West, they were presented as critiques of the communist regime, while from Russia, they were presented as national heroes, reactivating like this Russian culture. They were maybe both or neither, just bored architects doing free competitions. Maybe you, right? We think that boredom is one of the biggest engines for architects. So let's see what will come from this amazing lockdown period. During their golden years, the duo composed of Brodsky and Udkin proposed one of the most striking, at least for us, projects of the last decades. Their project, Ship of Fools, represents the quest for a common vision of a culture which has been destroyed and must be reborn from its ashes. Thanks to their multiple awards, they were invited to the US, where they presented one of their projects to a movie studio. Nothing came out of it. But they discovered a few months later that the movies What Dreams May Come From had used one of their projects. When they came back to Russia, they separated. Udkin started a useful office, and Brodsky, from his wood house in Moscow, started a paper career between art and architecture. To quote the author Mladen Stilanovich from his brilliant text in praise of laziness, artists from the East were lazy and poor because the entire system and insignificant factors did not exist. Therefore, they had time enough to concentrate on art and laziness. Even when they did produce art, they knew it was in vain. It was nothing. Mikhail Bilov, who won most of the competitions by mastering all the styles of architecture has to offer, was invited to compete in the Yokohama 2015 in 1990. In an interview for a Russian magazine years later, he described how arriving there, he was completely disappointed by all those famous greedy architects who were just flouting their portfolios. He was so disappointed and hopeless that after a few days, he left the competition and came back to Russia. Now, he builds Palladian villas for private real estate developers near Moscow, because, as he says, people like Palladian villas. Fully aware of this difficult position, he decided to never exploit anyone, and he works only with his partner in his office. In both scenarios, the architects decided to retreat from usefulness to uselessness, and then somehow return to usefulness. The word retreat brings to mind, of course, Henri David Thoreau, who wrote about his life alone outside of cities while still being actively politically engaged. He was never actually outside of the system, just at the border, in retreat, but still there, in this useful uselessness. I would prefer not to. The radical negation. I would prefer not to. Is, the sentence uttered by Melville's fictional character called Bartleby. This office assistant, one day he stopped being useful and just answered, I would prefer not to, whenever challenged, even when he was finally asked to leave the office. This I would prefer not to, isn't it the most radical possible act in a society where yes is the norm? Every revolution began with a no. No is pure uselessness. Think of, I don't know, Rosa Parks or all the activists that are nowadays famous because of this, no. Yes, from the moment you say no, you become an activist. It's strange. Please, still, let's be careful and not confuse popular architecture of the without and the architecture of the no. I would prefer not to. It is, yeah, strangely difficult to find examples of architects who stated, I would prefer not to, as if the profession were all about yes is more. I would prefer to. A project is a project, and if I don't do it, someone else will, right? A special nudge or dédicace to Bjark Ingels and the Bolsonaro regime. So most of the time in architecture, the situation is closer to I would love to, but nobody wants to hire me. Luc Deleu is a Belgian architect that started his career in the 70s by two fundamental acts. For his first show, he printed all the architectural projects that he loved, Le Corbusier, Archigramme, and crossed them out with a black pen as a way of saying that it was the end of architecture. His other major architectural intervention was the symbolic laying on the floor in the street of what he called the last stone of Belgium, as a way that again says we have built enough. The starting point of his office, called Top Office, was to question our positions and duties as architects. For a competition for a new university, he proposed to put the university on 3 aircraft carriers that roam the planet in the aim to grasp what we call the urbanism. Useless, right? Maybe because most of the clients think so too, or because of personal choice, his work was mainly produced and exhibited in art galleries. Like Bartleby, Luc Deleu decided to say, I would prefer not to. That's already something that we can learn from it. What is uselessness for someone can be very useful for someone else. But let's keep in mind that what we are still looking for, it's a complete usefulness. The only one which could lead to complete usefulness. Another Bartleby, despite his better judgment, is the French revolutionary architect, Jean-Jacques Lequeux. In the 10 years following the French Revolution in 1789, France transitioned from a monarchy to a republic, to an empire, and back to a republic. At each of these changes, each new system had to invent its own values, its own tools and identity, drawing its references from the past, from sciences, from new and old religious movements. Each time it was the reinvention of a nation. And of course, it was up to the architects to give it the adequate form. Because while historically architects asserted the divine order of the king, they suddenly had to legitimize these new forms of belief and governance. Lequeux had, the architect had a few ideas for the varying state of this era. Although each of them was, yes, always rejected by potential clients. It may even be said that his only genius resided solely in the fact that he handed over his life's work, all his drawings, projects, to the National Archive in Paris. Lequeux, like Boulet and Ledoux, that you know, tried to find the appropriate architectural character for this period of great social and political change. He was born in Rouen, and he trained a bit with the famous architect of that time, Soufflot. Lequeux worked for most of his life after that as an employee for the Paris municipality. He was drawing maps. But he tried to develop his own commissions, being his own client on the side. He died in relative squalor in his Paris apartment, leaving 3 bags of coffee and a box full of women's clothing, having only ever constructed 1 private hotel while working for Soufflot's nephew. In 1794, I'm coming back in a minute. Sorry, it was the outside. In 1794, the year the French revolutionary leader Robespierre was executed, Lequeux submitted a proposal for an arch called the Arch of the People. So the arch, so you have to imagine it, was showing Hercules equipped with the symbols of the French Revolution. A bonnet, a French cock, and an arm with a mace with which he destroys the symbols of the monarchy. On the back side of the drawing, several annotations, maybe perhaps by several different people, but that's another story. One of them reads, "This drawing may save me from the guillotine." And another writing was, "Anything for my homeland." One of Lequeux's facades, in which he collects and assembles existing elements, called Rendezvous sur la Belle Vue, is a testimony of Lequeux's quest for the right character or the useless character of this epoch. His answer was to decompose and recompose architecture, for which he was subsequently named the barbaric architect. Asceticism. Asceticism is a lifestyle characterized by the abstinence from sensual pleasures, often for the purpose of spiritual goals. The leader of this wonderful useless movement nowadays is, of course, Pierre Vittorio Aureli with his office dogma. Taking a step out of the construction industry to reflect on spiritual goals, in their case, architecture for architecture, not architecture play with styles or structure, but for the rehabilitation of the dead figure of the architect as an urban planner. The architecture they propose is absolutely devoid of any sensual pleasure and is an invitation for architects to become monks. Yeah, creating plans and sections similar to you have these Zen sentences designed to overcome reason, to reach the meditative space, such as this sentence. Listen to the sound of one hand clapping. Dogma's work is beyond utopia and dystopia, just like good and evil are 2 concepts that don't exist in the Zen philosophy. The question of uselessness is of course difficult because yes, dogma is useless to real estate, but the office still survives by teaching at the AA, where students have to pay thousands of pounds for their education. And thanks to the art world, which is inclined to transform a radical or cynical project into a commodity. So in a way, dogma's work is similar to Duchamp's Urinoir, a purely autonomous piece of art which can still perfectly fit into the market. Yeah, because this lecture will remain available online, we have to be careful to not make too many enemies so young. So please allow me to say that dogma, thank you for being so useless and in turn, yeah, to be so useful. In a fantastic interview of Claude Parent and Paul Virilio from Architecture Principe on the topic of concrete, that you should all watch, and especially now because you have time, right? Paul Virilio, as a brave defender of the masses and of concrete, argues that he doesn't want to talk about Mies van der Rohe because Mies is only about graphics and graphics will not last. So in 1969, it was still supposed to be just like, it's just Mies, it's a trend. Virilio and Parents and their oblique architecture suggested instead that architecture was, experience. As we know now, the fascination amongst architects for Mies as graphic designer never stopped and might have become even bigger now in our super visual culture. But yeah, Mies was more than that. In spite of his alleged usefulness, he was kind of a useful guy. He was looking for something completely useless, and because of that, didn't build so much. Of course, he was a bit of a Bartleby when the Nazi regime was fully in position. He decided to leave Germany for the US. I would prefer not to. Following Philip Johnson, he just preferred to not build tilted roofs. But yeah, Mies, although he didn't write a lot, but he was in search of the space of the Übermensch, the new horizontal churches where the modern man could reconnect with himself. His most important, not famous, but important projects were a series of patio houses. All different, all for only one person, surrounded by walls, creating a space with the eye level at the exact middle of the height, where a space where the modern man can find himself in this non-productive spiritual space. The garden surrounded by walls, creating the frame to just watch the leaves falling from the solitary tree to reconnect with the seasons. Was it a lockdown? Yeah, kind of. The rest, the details, were just the technique to achieve this condition of introspection. So maybe the question of the spiritual space, indeed, for the new woman and or man should be, more useful than just to respect or the required square meters. The operaist movement, initiated amongst others by Tony Negri and Mario Tonti, defended the idea that social progress must come from the workers who accepted to work with capitalism in order to redefine it. So in opposition to the vision where architects are positioned outside of the system and offer alternative utopian or dystopian views, the Marxist approach would, on the contrary, have them fighting the capitalist bourgeois ideology from the inside. The main idea being useless. but from the inside, useless from the inside. So in short, it's, yeah, sabotage. Superstudio, we love Superstudio, was founded in 1966 in Florence and dissolved a decade or so later in 78. So now three founding members passed away recently. But yeah, long live Superstudio. Their views on capitalism are less well known than their colleges, and similarly, their anti-architecture views. Superstudio did not really withdraw from architecture. On the opposite, the contrary, they looked for ways to practice architecture in the face of capitalism. They used their creative autonomy as criticism. So as operaists, they withdrew from the construction industry, saying everywhere that architecture is dead, but at the same time, they were producing the most fruitful architecture but well diffused through international magazines, exhibitions. Superstudio were frontally political and self-explanatory, which, as Kirsten Geers says, might be the reason why it was just impossible for them to get over the continuous monument. It's true, what can you do after that? But should we really talk about our goals or try to realize it? At Traumnovelle, we are still naive enough to share of our thoughts with you in a frontal way. This is also because in a way, we want to remind ourselves why we are doing what we are doing, leaving ourselves no place to hide. Superstudio began its practice through 2 exhibitions on objects of mass consumption with their Florentine colleagues Archizoom. So they attacked the first symbol of mass domesticity, the sofa. Their proposals, one of domestic insurrection, by breaking the expectations of comfort and other defined traits of the objects. So the objects they proposed were massive, embedded in pop culture, and cannot be ignored. With that, they compel us to question its uses, reinvent new ones, and in short, to rebel against the heaviness of the expectations surrounding an object. Superstudio offers here uselessness and irrational poetry. This reminds us of another project by Charlotte Posenske, the Square Tube series, which are standardized objects designed to behave in a non-standardized ways. By doing that, they are supposed to restore power to the owners. They are intended to be unruly and subjectively slanted. A critique that was made to this artist was that art was now an alibi to soft pedal the slums of the future. The same could also be said about Superstudio Hypersurface, which depicts a free space which cannot support any use or users. It is the very essence of architecture and the absence of it at the same time. As opposed to the continuous monument, this long thing, you have the hypersurface, this grid which was internet before internet. On that, you had a group of hippies as a symbol of liberation, freedom, and uselessness, right? Okay, hippies are also symbols of the Silicon Valley. Being completely useless seems to be a really difficult task. As Traumnovelle, that's the position that we are trying to hold so far. Being useless, but yeah, from the inside. Even if it seems that not being draftsmen, we are useful both to entertain the Biennale, the cultural world, and also design office spaces. But yeah, maybe we are not useless enough at the start. We kind of really aim to be, yeah, useful with that. In his essay, The Courage of Hopelessness, the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek said that when we all lose hope is how a revolution will appear. The communist revolution started especially because there was no hope anymore, which of course will inevitably lead to the question of, okay, and now what? The feature, there's 4 ways of trying to be useless, share, is the underlying ambition to be truly useful. We do think it is important to always try to be useless or outside, but to keep the will or the wish to share what you have learned to others, to launch something, to try something, to fight as you can with all the tools at your disposals, to be an architect that will be useful to society by claiming his or her uselessness. Of course, being useless is a tactic, a strategy. Like Superstudio saying that they withdraw from architecture, then doing everything but that. As Sun Tzu advises in The Art of War, all warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are here. So let's all be as useless as possible in order to be, completely useful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Johnny. So now it's time for the team to turn off and ask your question. Angelina, Ferreira Gustavo, Bruno Franco, Michaela, Emily Bourlot.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you a lot for the lecture. It was really, really great. I'd like to ask you, after you guys graduated, was there an immediate need to try to subvert the client relationship and migrate to an unconventional way of applying your knowledge? Or was this something thought of in college or in the workspace?
So we started Traumnovelle when we were still students, because one of our teachers told us that it was impossible for us to work together and that our project was too much narrative. So then we just decided to say, okay, let's start our office and do whatever we want to and ask the questions that we wanted to. So since that, we work with, we continue Traumnovelle on the nights, weekends, and since are doing, but like since almost 2 years now, or maybe just 1, but it's a lot. We are only like working for Traumnovelle, but before that, we kind of always use or see Traumnovelle as a way to, a place of freedom. So now we are in this interesting moment in which we are trying to keep this freedom, but in the same time, I have the feeling that this freedom is becoming more and more rich, because it's not just like saying something without any constraints. Now it's playing with constraints with other people, and we are learning a lot. We are learning a lot. And tell me if my answer is too long, but yeah, as I said, we are still like in the cultural world because we want to be there. We want to be in architecture, talk with architects, but in the same time, we want to be at for us, something which is kind of the opposite, like building, working with like industries, factories, like office space, people that are kind of, you could think only look for like square meters, but in real, they are like looking and hope to have something else, something less useless or useful.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to make the other question. Having in mind that usually, at least in our research, you have more utopian projects and design projects, what are the values that you give for the function and contextualization during the study and creation of these designs?
What are the values?
That you give for function and contextualization on a utopian design.
I was thinking again about this amazing lecture or like interview of Claude Parent and Paul Virilio, in which someone was asking something about function, and he said that function is ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we have. I think we are pragmatic utopians because we are trying to kind of reach some goals. So as everyone, we like to always like for like papers or buildings to have like all the information to understand the context, the situation, not be stuck to it. So that's why we always start our project by doing a research of, it could be 1 week or 2 weeks, in which we are trying to address a question which is not related, which is related to the project, but which is not about like the neighbors or like the program, not pragmatic things, as a way to kind of avoid the situation in which we just solve issues. Because I mean, you don't need architects to solve 99% of the issues that you have in architecture. You know, people knows where to put a bed, but there is this like 3% of the rest, which is why you need us to create something or to help something or to be useless.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello?
Hello.
Do you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Sorry, I don't have camera, so I'm going to use just microphone. So my question is, do you regularly integrate sustainable and low-cost design strategies in your project? And if yes, what are the challenges of implementing that strategies into the existing realities? As I've seen your interview with someone that you mentioned in your speech, you're working on existing buildings and construction. If you are working on sustainable and low-cost design strategies in your project, what are the challenges of implementing that strategies?
So it's, I think it's right that you, and good that you mentioned the castle. So for the castle, of course, the client and us and everyone now, we're looking for a sustainable, like zero carbon thing, but it's a castle. So actually you can't isolate it from the outside or inside without creating like thermal gaps. So you will not create like a passive house from a castle. And as one of our partner in this project said, in terms of sustainability and ecology, this castle is few centuries old, so which is maybe way better than having like a sustainable house in plastic that will last 20 years. So for us, so we have like kind of two topics, one which is here since more time, architecture and politics, and then we have the second one, which is ecology, which is really difficult. But with ecology, because we know that there is this, this absolute lack of narratives able to put us in move. Again, I was talking about the market, the economy. So of course now we know that we have like solutions to have like, I don't know, solar panels and I don't know, hydrogen or things that can just like can allow us to continue as it was before. In the same time, the things that are missing the most are like decisions in terms of like global economy, government, and we're just like focused on our own like personal decision. So yes, of course, I have 3 bins and I'm sorting my trash. So yes, of course, in my buildings now, our buildings now, we will consider the cycle of production and we'll use only, I don't know, wood or something. Okay, but still, it's not the answer. So you have the sustainable things, but I mean, we all know also that the most sustainable building is the one which is not built. So that's like kind of a lot of question. So of course, we because we all have to find and to think about like what should be the solutions to just to survive, by also kind of being cautious with like too easy things to apply on a facade, like having like a sustainable high-rise facade that can collect trash from the air and then create some jewels from it.
Okay. And can I ask, okay, after that lecture, I just wonder, what is the relationship between usefulness and sustainability? How we can place uselessness architecture in sustainable design? Yeah,
and again, a great question. I think maybe one of the answer of how to translate uselessness into sustainability is to take a jar, live inside it, or be in the forest, and that's it. Oh, and be completely useless. So yes, of course, that's a super easy answer, but yes, you will be super sustainable. Something else could be, okay, I want to be useless to be useless, so I will just not build, or I will build something that will have no heater, no glass, and nothing to warm it. And so again, I'm useless, but maybe I will be useful in terms of sustainability. So uselessness can carry a lot of ways to solve the issue. We should be more cautious about people that are trying to be useful and sustainable. Like, I don't know, I will not say names of architects, but I'm sure you know plenty of architects that are building a lot, but in a useful, sustainable way. I'm kind of more interested by the architects that are not building a lot and that are more useless.
Okay, good points to be mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Maybe Ali wants to ask a question. I'm seeing in the chat. Okay, so we have a question from Federico that has no mic. I will read it. Is as the Superstudio manifested is uselessness architecture a lot through furniture design. Useless furniture as a sofas or the histogrammi. Do you think this is still a possibility to produce critical furniture pieces as an alternative?
I will say yes, because we have to we have to look everywhere to find ways to be useless. So we have to yeah, we have to invent new ways with like what the tools that we have. The issue again is when they decided to produce those useless furniture, it was for the art market, and now it's like a super useful product that people can sell. So it's very tricky, and we know that the moment it reached that point, it's not useless anymore, so it's not powerful anymore. So with furniture, can we still like create like useless things? I'm sure we can, like with anything. And I think we should try and think of how to do it, because again, there is this like kind of super difficult game of being useless, but yeah, still trying or to be there, or still willing to be useful at the end. Not just like, yeah, maybe it's not doing something, but not doing something is maybe useful. So it's very a tricky question.
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, if there is someone else to ask that wants to ask something, otherwise I will ask you. A lot of students are writing us, what about that reference is doing, what about the other one? So there were a lot of great references from Melville to Nuzzordine, and we will say that maybe you can give us a list and we will publish it along with interview.
With pleasure, with pleasure.
And how do you get to know all these things? Do you have a pattern maybe in your, or just curiosity?
Because we at the studio, we all love to read a lot. And so when we were students, we were studying in history, theory, and criticism, and then art, architecture, and paysage. And so I think that in both, like looking at history, looking at reading was something important. And I have to say that I have we have like we kind of love to we don't think that now we have to invent anything, because we have I think few centuries of wonderful thoughts, architecture, writings, not only in architecture but also in roman, in novels, or social sciences. So it's there. So we just have to like make connections. And I study about the references. We studied some of them for different things, like either papers or thesis or other things. And they are kind of also people that are maybe with us since a really long time, like fathers that we would like to kill.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Red.
And I think we still have the students of group number 2. So I read the name. Poso Palacio Maria Gabriela, Kok Merv, Keshipur Nazanin, Xingtingye, Kiavosh Adzitskani. Sorry for my pronunciation. So if you're ready, you can ask your question. Well, I can start from a question that Amidreza Norozi wrote in the chat, and it is, what is the relation between climate change and effect of that on society from architectural perspective?
Sorry, what is the relation between what and what? Climate change and
effect of that on society from architectural perspective. So between climate change and the effect on that on society from architectural perspective.
Okay, so the question is, what are the effects of climate change in architecture?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Exactly.
I mean, it's kind of obvious. So obvious. So more pandemics, less water, more drought, the market that will try to pay for the disasters will be bankrupt, so less money for architects. So that's just like the first funny things. And then we can continue. So more money. So like an environment which will become more and more inhabitable. Houses that will become like, I don't know, dungeons to survive. Yeah, there are plenty, and some of them are again already here. We don't have the issues about like the carbon emissions in most of the case, and we can just like continue and continue. And what is fantastic is how the climate crisis that we have right now, all the questions are the same than the questions that we should raise to the capitalism, because it's really like, yeah, it's effect and consequence. So yeah, it's just changing, yeah, everything.
Okay, thanks. There is a specification in the question, is that what about on society problems? That means between climate change and effect on that. So the effect of the climate change on society. And
yeah, they are plenty. There are plenty. If you, we can think, for instance, okay, when you have a change in the climate, you will have migrations. Okay, so you will have more people from places where it's inhabitable that will try to just like reach other parts which will be uninhabitable. So that's something that is already changing a lot of things. Then you also have like, again, like states that are disappearing, that are not able to, I don't know, to contribute to the goods, or neither to take decisions to oppose those climate changes, because like now in the lockdown, you can see that it was such a difficult decision to decide to shut down all the factories because of a pandemic, and that just like, yeah, just one part of it. And so societies now are changing for, yeah, societies are always changing. Now, what I do hope is, and I'm talking maybe about something else, maybe something more politic, is that finally we understand that, as, yeah, for instance, as Jacques said, we need to have like just, yeah, a world health system that can be sure that we are all safe everywhere, because if someone is sick there, we are all sick. So hopefully, like, this climate crisis will make us more aware that it's pointless to have borders. It's pointless to be against like another nation, because we are all in the same boat. And if, I don't know, Torino decided to just like stop consuming any CO2 and making the best place on Earth, and the neighbors are still doing the opposite, there is no point with that. So yeah, changes are here, but I hope that the changes that will come will just like make us and just like being aware of how we need to have like politics again, right?
okay, I think we have a question. Open up your mic in order to do the question.
Is it me? Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I took off the headphone. Yeah, so hi, Johnny.
Hello.
So I don't know if I should introduce myself, because I'm kind of like lurking here. I'm not from Torino, like from the Politecnico, like I'm from like, and now I'm in London, but yeah, a friend invited me over. So my question is more related to basically, because you mentioned academia like several times. And my doubt there is like, my question is more related to the fact that basically every time we mention academia, of course, we mention like personalities or like subjectivity. So to me, like, okay, to like be very short, like, do you think that academia should be kind of like reshaped in a way that we kind of like avoid to resemble the same patterns, which is basically to say, we basically like, so follow like, I don't know, like architects or like whatever, like offices, kind of like trying to follow these subjects or like, you know, personalities, And this thing is basically like happening in academia as well, because you have like people basically like applying to different schools because maybe there is someone teaching there, or maybe there is this name, or maybe there is that. So it's kind of like resembling the same pattern of like kind of like money market driven academia. So in a way, like, do you think that maybe like avoiding this kind of like subjectivity in academia could be a way to kind of like step out of this kind of pattern?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, nice to meet you. And it's a really, really good question. So I don't know if it's really like subjectivity, but the thing is, yeah, for instance, in Belgium, I was at the first years mainly trained to be able to to design social housing and cultural center, because your teachers are the one on the market. So like the school and academias are just a way to be sure that you will be useful later, which is like completely stupid. Fortunately, we also had like amazing teachers that were looking for uselessness. But yeah, I mean, now to have like academias still working as if it was something to just prepare you to fit into the models, but I'm not trying to develop something else, is a shame. It's definitely a shame. We don't have the answer of what should be like a good school or a good academia, because we know that, yeah, for instance, like so little came out from the Bauhaus, for instance. You can have like, it's more like the people that you will meet, like the discussions that you can have. And I think that, of course, if it was more easy for those people, so they don't have to always fight with the main institution to be able to spread something valuable, it would be more fantastic, or maybe less. I don't know. Yes, definitely yes. And especially now with like university being like the new norms, it's really, really frightening to just create useful little draftmen for society. And so at your question, yes, subjectivity is definitely one of the most important things that we should develop in academias. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, Antonio is telling you, cool, great, thanks. And we've got another question here that is from the YouTube streaming, and there is Giada Di Baldassarre, and she's asking, I would like to ask what could be the relationship between uselessness architecture and the current necessity to design resilience in our cities' territories?
What is resilience? Sorry.
La résilience. I don't know if it it's about how something can transform itself in order to adjust, to adapt, and to survive to a certain situation.
So I think the answer is in the resilience, like Rosa Parks saying no, how to adapt, be useless, and then you will see, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that as human beings, we are very resilient beings. And I think Giada would know about how can we do as architect, with the concept of useless, to create more resilience in our cities and territories. I guess reading.
And so I think, again, by trying to not think in terms of, okay, cities have to be resilient, so I need to, I don't know, I need to build a park, or I need to build a residence thing. No, first you need to think about what is being an architect, and find a smart and resilient way to act to save the situation. One of the most amazing, even like useless and useful in the same time office today is Rotor. They're Belgian too. We have a lot of Belgian references, of course. And they decided to not kind of to withdraw from architecture, and just like look at the cycle of materials. And they managed to localize on a map where you can find like secondhand materials. And then they started to disassemble buildings. And from that, they kind of opened like a shop where you can have like pieces from all buildings. So they became completely useless to like the norms of being an architect, but they became like so useful in so many ways. Maybe now they're too useful, they will have to be useless again, but that's another topic. Not yet, I think. So so yeah, I think the first thing is really like to think of just, okay, I have this question, what is the question? What is resilience? What is it to produce architecture? How can I be effective? And it's not, yeah. Yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Johnny. And I think now we've got a question from Nazarin Keshepur.
Yes. Okay, again me, but this time on behalf of my group. We are concerned to know, how did you come up with the idea to construct Eurotopie, and what criteria is used to establish priorities and make design decisions for democratic spaces that you mentioned in your official website?
Yeah. So again, it's kind of, I mean, for us, even interesting to talk about uselessness, because as we said, we are trying, we're trying to be useful. So one of the useless decision that we decided to take with the project Eurotopie was to talk about politics and the state of Europe by just analyzing the European neighborhood in Brussels, which from the outside could be like something super like boring, ugly, but when you look at it, there is you discover plenty of amazing things. So this like step back from like what is normally explored in architecture and the tools. By doing that, by this useless step, we discover other things. Of course, I can't explain to you all our process of like decision makings, but in the same time, what we are trying to do when we are building anything, so we are always trying to have like a research, to have like a question, values, like things that we know that we will not be able to achieve 10% of the dream, like creating like this new Europe, but still we have like one value which we think is important. And we are trying to have all this kind of theory and then put it into the space, not with words anymore, but just with the experience. So by the space, you are able maybe to understand something about what is the big question. In the case of Eurotopie in Venice, and also Eurotopie, because again, for Eurotopie, we work with many other people, like artists, like photographers, graphic designers. So it was always like a discussion between like all the fields, because for us, it's kind of obvious that we are in this like wonderful circle of people. So yeah, we decided to create a space, a pavilion for Eurotopie, to maybe make Eurotopie or Europe, the question of having like a strong Europe, more important for architects, just to criticize, but just like to accept at first, to look at it. And then we decided we wanted to create this pavilion, which was this free space, able to just like, empower people. So of course, and that's something that we are becoming more and more aware. We use like this archetype of the Agora that we finished as a way also to address like collective memories. So you have like all those questions, because we hate answers, which is sometimes an issue in the process making. But this Agora, this space, which is in discussion with an existing space. So this is a kind of sustainability, right? And then, you have a feeling. You can go, and if you want to discover the other layers, you can, of course, but we like to see the world as first, like the values behind your special experiences and how they are translated into space, into things, or into even void. I don't know if I answered the question, but
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Johnny. I don't know if you have still time. We've got another couple of questions, still energy. Okay, so it's up to Giulio Gonnella.
Yes, hi. I used to be a student of the Politecnico di Torino as well. So I wanted to go back to your lecture specifically, which I really enjoyed, especially in the part where you address the Aureli concepts of autonomy. And so my question would be related to autonomy and uselessness. I would try to ask you, don't you think that, let's say, what are the instruments to counteract the possible, I'd say, appropriation of autonomy and uselessness by economic forces, namely by capitalist modes of production? Because I think that's kind of like the main bias also in the Aureli's theory of autonomy and in the production of objects that are thought to be kind of not related to the present modes of production, but that can actually then be appropriated by them. So that's kind of like a threat, I would say, to this kind of production.
Yeah. I think that's the related to autonomy. That's the biggest and most important question. I think that's a question that we are also asking to ourselves. We really don't have the answer to that, even if we're trying to be more like in the system and working inside. But I have no, because it's so, as you said again, so important. Even if you have like this wish to be autonomous, to be like in this autonomy, to look for something and not just to work for the market. If you are good at what you're doing, at some point you just like absorbed by it. So I really don't know. That's kind of a question that I would like to, I don't know, ask to Dogma or to people that are working on this autonomy since a long time. But in the same time, I guess, and if you read it, you read him, you see that he wants to be political, but he wants to be autonomous. But yeah.
Okay. Thanks. And now we've got another question from Xingting Ye.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lea. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm the one member of the group 2, and I have a useless question to ask you.
Great.
It's not very relative to the topic today, but I'm just curious about them. My question is, how do you use fiction as the analytical, critical tool during the design? Because I checked one of the projects called The Part, remember, from the officer website. And it is possible the conflict between the people's behaviors or story happens in the park. Because as we know, as a normal fiction, we can know some conflict made by the author to push forward the development of the storytelling. So I just curious about how the story can be spoken in that park as you design. That is my question.
I think fiction is something central in our work. So we are using fictions in many different ways, but again, fictions are just a way for us to kind of have come starting point that there is no real reality, so that we all decided to have like a fiction, and so we can just like agree and disagree upon that. In the case of the park was part of a series of projects in which we really took like fictions from a philosopher, Bruce Bécout, that we worked with him on Eurotopie later, and we tried to with Le Parc to just like create the space for this park, with this idea again of how to translate values or space into values into a space. So we are kind of interested. Of course, it's sometimes more obvious in novels than in life, but yeah, we have to remember that behind the, I don't know, churches or the Parthenon, the Pantheon, or even like normal corporate offices, you also have like some fictions and novels written somewhere. So yeah, what is also interesting is because we kind of want to have a position on, I will not say build our own fiction, but build a fiction. And now, especially now, because we have to when we want to, because that's something that that's our kind of goal. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we are working with clients also that have their own fictions, and so it's how to understand their fictions, to understand their stories, and to manage to find like the new common and collective project. And by using fiction, we are always trying to have like this idea of collective values, or uselessness, but in a useful term, being present, because we really don't want never to I don't know, just like I will not say anything because maybe we'll have to. So yeah, I don't know if I answered. That's
Thank you, Johnny. Well, today, like, we've got a lot of questions, so we have the last one that is in the chat, and then we will ask to everybody the chance for a last question, and then we go to the end of our lecture. So the question here is about uselessness, but about buildings and restoration. Those are the topics, and I try to read you in my best English the question of Armin Shamseddini that asks, where is the importance to restore useless historical building? Because there are a lot of historical buildings, but some of them are not interesting for people. We need to develop our cities, so we could not save all the buildings in all the time. Why is it important to save useless buildings?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and the answer is there. So first, yes, exactly. Let's ask the right questions. Is it useful to restore buildings? No, maybe not. So let's be useless and not restore them. So yeah, definitely.
Okay. So if is there somebody who wanna ask a last question? Is now the moment. Please write in the chat so we can create an order and not an overlapping. A little question. From the team. Is there any association related to the uselessness?
Yeah, I just doing that. The funny thing is this topic started when I was discussing with Cruz Garcia from White Think Tank. We were in Paris. I think it was the second time that we met, and it was absolutely amazing. And we started to discuss about uselessness, being both, and maybe they're way better in uselessness than us, but super useless, and trying to see maybe it's something more to explore. In their case, they explore this topic through laziness.
Not bad. Okay. And I think there is no longer any question. So let's go to the end to this lecture. Or Johnny, do you want to add anything?
Thanks a lot. It was an interesting experience to speak alone in a living room. I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, I think I can speak from everybody. Here somebody is writing best ACC lecture so far. And yeah, well, thanks a lot, Johnny, to give us the chance to take a moment in which we could start like flipping over our way of thinking and try to pass from usefulness to unusefulness, and from political to poetic, and to jump on the ship of fools. That is always great to go back to the Plato's words. And yeah, and thanks to let us think about the need to reinvent our own values and new formula and new path to follow, and not just to follow the written stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks to everybody, and see you in the next CC lecture, that for this time it will be on Monday, 30th of March, and you will find all the infos on the DASP website and on Facebook. Thanks a lot to everybody, and have a great time. Ciao. Ciao, Johnny.